I'm excited to announce that our online Mindfulness Fertility series is starting Thursday, April the 25th. This is a 6-week online program that helps embrace your fertility journey with proven relaxation techniques and stress management strategies that help you regain control and cope with infertility in a much more positive way. Space is very limited. Hop on the wait list and be notified first when registration opens. This program is a must if you have an IUI or an IVF coming up and is essential for anyone trying to get pregnant naturally. Go to fabfertile.com, that's fabfertile.com, and click on Shop Mindfulness Fertility Series to jump on the wait list. That's Fab Fertile, fabfertile.com, and click on the shop link and then link to Mindfulness Fertility Series to jump on the wait list.
It's become so common in our society for us to not feel 100% and have symptoms, but just because they're common doesn't mean they're normal. It is a sign that your body is trying to tell you that there's something going on.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark. My mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. And most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming back Brandy Buskow to the podcast, and we're digging into why IVF should be the last step on your fertility journey. So definitely check out episode number 6 for a functional medicine 101 talk, plus a look at some of the tools we use to help couples conceive. So Brandy is part of my team here at Fab Fertile. She's an integral part of our couples coaching program, which uses functional lab testing, such as food sensitivity testing, hormone testing using urine, stool testing, looking at the DNA of your stool, and hair tissue mineral analysis, diet and lifestyle changes that dramatically improve conception. So if you're struggling with infertility, your body is desperately trying to tell you something. And focusing on your health will either help you get pregnant naturally, or if you do need to go to the fertility clinic, it will improve your chances of success. So Brandy is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and a certified transformational health coach and an EFT practitioner, so emotional freedom technique. She loves supporting women so they can learn how functional medicine addresses the underlying cause of disease or illness. Before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Brandy, excited to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Sarah. Excited to be back.
Yeah, awesome. So today we're going to be digging into really a topic that we speak with lots of women, obviously, on a regular basis, couples that are struggling with infertility, and the majority of people actually have gone through some sort of an IUI or an IVF before they start to look at functional medicine, before they reach out to us and listen to this podcast, the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, and looking at doing things naturally. So we just wanted to have a conversation today and talking about, well, why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. And I think it just depends on whether you're looking at the conventional wisdom or conventional thinking or functional thinking. And so if we take the conventional way of thinking, which is what most of our healthcare is, you go to the doctor, you present with problems. They don't really have the time to go through your entire health history and ask you questions and ask about your lifestyle. So they're going to say, okay, this is the problem. I learned about this in school. Here's a prescription or a therapy that I know of to solve that problem. And so it's, I don't think we can fault the conventional medical system because that is the way they're trained. So, when somebody comes to them and says, well, I've been trying to get pregnant for a year, it hasn't worked, I don't know what to do, then they start down that conventional route of they'll do some tests, and if it doesn't look like, hormones are off or something like that, rather than asking why, they just say, well, you're a good candidate for IVF. And IVF is a technology that I'm glad we have this technology because there are definitely people that need it. And so it's very good that we have that available now today for people, but I think it's overused. And that's where, we're going to dig in this podcast on what other things should you be thinking about first before going down the road of IVF, and why you might want to consider those other things first.
Absolutely. And I just interviewed last week an episode with Dr. Sean Tassone, and it'll be coming on in the podcast the next couple weeks in April. He's a obstetrician, gynecologist, and also has his PhD in mind body medicine. So when I said to him, if someone comes to you with with infertility, and if they've been struggling for over a year and over 6 months, what would you do? And his first step is, let's look at acupuncture. Let's look at some mind body therapies instead of going straight to the clinic, kind of looking at that mindfulness piece. Because a lot of times we get ourselves so worked up. And I know for me, when I had that diagnosis of POF, I remember her just reaching up on the shelf, grabbing the brochure to the fertility clinic. And I freaking took that thing and I ran with it and I went straight there. And I was so disconnected from my body. And then, not until I was 40 years later, after I had my children with donor eggs, I was very fortunate. One of the people that actually that this has worked. It was worked on the first transfer for both my children, two separate donors. But then I had all these health issues, and postpartum was. I was just listening to Dr. Kelly Brogan, who is a functional psychiatrist, and she uses a functional approach, and she was talking about postpartum rage, and that's what I had, man. I was not crying, I was freaking mad, or angry. Anyway, so it's just we've become disconnected from our body. So to really kind of say, let's listen to what some of those symptoms and what's going on in our body. And so today we wanted to really dig into the whole, IVF is big business. And so in the States alone, there's over 333,000 IVF procedures done. And that was in 2018. And so and it's costly, it's expensive, right? I think we all know that. The average cost of an IVF is $12,000 plus fertility drugs, exams, diagnostic tests. And then the average IVF cycle, which I'm not sure if many people know this, because a lot of times we think, and even the stats, which we'll go into of a successful IVF, average IVF takes 3 cycles at a cost of anywhere between $60,000 for a successful outcome. Which when we start, I don't think that's what we're thinking. We're thinking it's going to work on the first try. I know for myself, I was lucky enough for my son and my daughter that it worked on the first try, but we had 2 embryos left over after I had our daughter, and we went back in, and I was just bound and determined to have our kids close together, and those 2 didn't work. So anything you wanted to say there, Brandy?
I just wanted to kind of borrow an analogy from a colleague, a fellow FDN, and where we compare conventional wisdom and functional wisdom. So the analogy is, you're a detective. You go to the crime scene. You look at the crime and you grab one piece of evidence and you go back and you try to figure out what happened with that one piece of evidence. And so essentially, conventional wisdom is you come in and your one piece of evidence is you've been trying for a year and it hasn't been successful. So our determination is IVF. Whereas when you look at a functional approach, we become the detective and we dig deeper and we ask lots of questions and we do lots of testing so that we can find out what other things are going on underneath that can be contributing to this. And by doing that, we're going to get all the pieces of evidence and we're going to get a better picture of what's actually going on, rather than just the one piece of evidence. I've been trying for a year and it hasn't worked, so this is the only option. And I think that's a good analogy to really help people understand how the 2 approaches differ. And we're going to go into some stats like Sarah talked about IVF and the costs and some of the risks associated. And this isn't to fearmonger anyone or to dissuade them from using IVF. Like I said earlier, it's a great technology that we have for those people that really need it. But I really do want to encourage people, check out all of your options first before just going straight to IVF.
Absolutely. And as I say, in my case, I thought that was my only option. And so let's kind of go through some stats here. So the average IVF has a 20 to 35% success rate. So that's the average. And then this is interesting too. And I think we kind of all intuitively know this, but maybe not. I just wanted to talk about it. So the fertility market, so it's projected to reach 30 billion by 2023. And this is from Market Watch. As of 2016, it's valued at 16 billion. So this is big, big business. And now certain companies are starting to cover the cost of IVF. So Facebook covers up to $100,000. Salesforce covers up to $75,000. So that can be seen as a benefit. But then I'm also thinking that people may think, oh, because I've spoken to people, to women that have done 6 and 7 IVFs and they're covered by insurance, and it has not worked. And the heartbreak and the emotional turmoil associated with that is, it's insurmountable. It's huge.
And the procedure, it's such a financial decision. So, like you said, if there are more and more companies who are covering this, then people are going to think to themselves, well, we're in a financial tight spot. I don't think that we can invest the money in going down that road to really see if there's some other things going on. Let's just jump to doing IVF because our insurance covers it. And it's really sad that it's a money issue. And I think that's where we need to re-educate ourselves and change our mindset about it so that it's not a money issue. This, at the time, yes, it is a money issue, but you also have to think about it as it's your body, and how is it going to affect your body? How is it going to affect your mindset? Like Sarah said, if you've done 6 of them and they've been unsuccessful, that's devastating to the mindset. And so it's really, really important to think everything through and not just the financial part of it before you make a concrete decision.
And then as of 2018, there's 500 fertility clinics in the US, and as of 1985, there were 40. And this was, we talked about this in the interview I did with Kathleen Di Chiara on talking about the food supply, and her story was featured in the documentary Secret Ingredients. I highly recommend that you check that out, talking about switching to organic and non-GMO foods, and then people in that documentary getting pregnant naturally after simply going organic. So 500 clinics in 2018, 40 in 1985, which to me is just a massive jump. And then the global market for fertility drugs is worth more than 976 million. The US market is worth 600 to 700 million. So, a lot of us being, having to use these drugs, which, do we know really how that's impacting our health as well as the health of our children?
Yeah, and I mean, there may not be, for all of the drugs on the market, there isn't necessarily long-term studies, long-term, like longer than a year or 2 years, really looking at the impact of how these drugs are affecting not only you as the person taking in these drugs, but also your children and your children's children. I don't think those studies are happening, and the problem with pharmaceuticals is that the faster they can get something out onto the market so that people can start using it, the better. And they are not considering how it's going to impact you long term. And I think that's another important consideration.
Yeah, because the first IVF baby, I think she's 36 years old. So getting into the time where they're looking to start conceiving, and how that's going to affect future generations. So we don't really know the studies yet. And do we want to wait until we have them? I don't know. I don't think so. I think we need to look at things differently now. So investors obviously are seeing big money in fertility, building national chains of fertility clinics, and then some doctors potentially pushing patients toward unnecessary treatments and tests.
Right. And I mean, and again, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody or bash anybody, but I mean, there are, unfortunately, there are doctors that will get kickbacks for sending patients to certain treatments. And it does happen, and it's an unfortunate reality. And it's something, like I said, it's a big decision, and it's really, really important that people have all of the information so they can make the most informed decision they possibly can before they decide to go down that route. And that's essentially what we're trying to provide here, is some education, and also empower you to dig deeper yourself. Go on the internet, research, find out more information, get all of the information up front. Don't just blindly jump into it.
Yeah, and back then, I thought I was an educated, smart woman, and when I was going through this, and I did not research or do anything. I just listened, and I was, lucky enough to have both my children, but then my health began to suffer later. So it is, and that's what our whole platform, as Brandy just said, is really educating you to just kind of go, wait a minute, let's just look at this a little differently and dig into it and look at it in a different light. Okay, so how IVF impacts the mother. So there's a Canadian Medical Association journal, and I'll link the journal here. So women who undergo IVF, there's a slightly higher risk of developing severe complications, women who become pregnant naturally. So with IVF, there's the ovarian hyperstimulation, preterm delivery, preeclampsia, and potentially cardiovascular disease later in life.
Yeah, and these are really, really important to consider, because and I'm sure we're going to talk about this further on, but everybody feels like they're on a time crunch and they have to do this, they have to get it done, and they rush into a decision. And that's why, again, we're sharing this information so that you have it. You really have to think about that. If I go through with this and I am successful, did the doctor explain to me that I could get preeclampsia? That is a potentially dangerous situation later in pregnancy. Is it going to affect my fertility in the future? Is it, because fertility in women is basically our barometer of health. So if you're getting ovarian hyperstimulation, and then after you have the baby, your fertility is just completely in the toilet or it's all over the place, that is a picture of what your health could be afterwards. And that's important. You want to be healthy when you have your baby. You don't want to just sacrifice it just to have your baby and then your health isn't great afterwards. And I mean, Sarah, you've talked about your health struggles that you had afterwards. And so that's why it's so, so important to have this information beforehand.
Yeah, we see a lot of women that come with secondary infertility, and they're like, oh, the first one, everything was fine. And then the second one, it's just not working. And then really digging deeper. And then they've done, many cycles or many IVFs after on the second one and still not working. That's another kind of way of looking at it too. Also, so there's some other studies done in the 90s and the mid 2000s that suggested women who underwent IVF might be more likely than the general population to be diagnosed with ovarian cancer, breast cancer, and uterine cancer. But larger studies investigating this issue don't show the same link. And there's one study from Denmark published in 2019, looked at more than 50,000 Danish women who took fertility drugs and found no increased risk of ovarian cancer. Another published in 2011 looked at 24,000 Swedish women and found that IVF actually decreased the chances of those three common cancers. So there's conflicting studies on this. We just wanted to bring these to light. Some are saying that it may increase. Some are saying that it may not. To me, I don't need to really wait for a study to come out. is my take on this. What's your take?
Well, and we just don't know. And it makes sense because, I mean, when you're going through IVF, you are being injected or taking exogenous hormones. And so the same can be true for women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, and they are put on hormones to balance things out. We just don't know. Each person is going to react to these differently. So for some women, taking exogenous hormones work great for them. They feel amazing. They go through menopause. It's a breeze, no issues later in life. But for other women, their body just cannot accept the hormones, and it just triggers a cascade of health issues. And so each and every one of us is totally individual, and we just don't know for sure how all of these drugs are impacting us.
Mm-hmm. And then the impact on children's health. So the American Journal of Human Genetics found that babies born to moms using IVF with fertility drugs had a higher incidence of retinoblastoma and neuroblastoma cancers. Which again, we're not fear mongering here, or obviously that sounds scary, but it's just sort of getting that information out to you. Now, I experienced, so both my kids have food sensitivities and allergies and eczema and potentially autoimmune disease. So and so there's a study from the Journal of American College of Cardiology, a small study finding that there's a increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So I experienced sort of the other food allergy issues with my children. So both my kids are dairy and gluten free. They're teenagers, so that can be a nightmare. But they definitely feel improved health when they take those foods out of their diet.
The same is true for women who don't go through infertility, and I think that's where maybe the study didn't dig a little bit deeper, but we do know that the health of the mother before getting pregnant has a very big impact on her child. We also know from epigenetics that the health of your own mother when she was pregnant with you is going to impact you, and it's going to impact your children. So, just knowing that, you would want to do everything possible to make sure you are healthy before getting pregnant, whether it's through IVF or naturally, because we do know that that has an impact on kids. We know it can impact allergies. It can impact, like you said, IBS, stomach issues, different diseases down the road. So regardless of whether you go through IVF or you don't, prenatal health is super important. And that's what we're trying to educate you and get that information out to you so that you have all the facts beforehand.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that working on your health ahead of time, your preconception health is always a good idea and never a bad idea. And I guess it's really too the whole epigenetic side of things, where the health of your mother and yourself, and then affecting your future generations, to look at that in the complete big picture and say, wait a minute, because if we all know so many, like if the majority of couples can get pregnant naturally, why do we all know so many people going to the fertility clinic? And we talked about this, actually that quote was from the book Beyond the Egg Timer. And it's really that discussion actually to dig into, well, why do we know so many people? Well, a lot of times because the technology is there and it's there, so why wouldn't I use it? Another big thing is this patience thing, saying, well, if it's there and I can use it, why wouldn't I go straight there and get this thing done? And I can completely relate to that, because that's what I did. I didn't wait. I didn't dig further. I was disconnected from my body. But, doing what I know about functional medicine, I would have done it differently. I wouldn't obviously have changed my children or anything, but I would have handled that situation differently, because my body, even for years prior to that, was trying to tell me something. I had those, those health issues, which I think that a lot of the times we may ignore. And I had irregular periods. I had yeast infections. I had this weird fungal rash on my chest. I all of a sudden started getting acne. I had dandruff. So I had some weird things going on, and I just went on the birth control pill because that's what I was told to do, instead of going, well, wait a minute, why?
Yeah. And you'll hear us say this a lot. Symptoms are maybe common, but they're not normal.
Right.
And we've kind of numbed ourselves to listening to our body and trying to figure out what it's trying to tell us. And so if we have these symptoms that everybody else has, acne, well, everybody else has acne. It's not a big deal. Like, I'll just ignore it. Or, I've got gas and bloating. Well, a lot of people do. I'll just take some Pepto-Bismol or something. I mean, it's become so common in our society for us to not feel 100% and have symptoms, but just because they're common doesn't mean they're normal. It is a sign that your body is trying to tell you that there's something going on. And like I mentioned earlier, for women especially, our periods and our cycles are the barometer for how our health is doing. So if they're irregular, that's a sign that something is going on, and to dig deeper. And just going on the pill to solve it, it's Band-Aid. It's not, and this is going to be a little bit ranty because it irritates me, but it's a Band-Aid. How is putting you on birth control and essentially telling your ovaries, hey, go to sleep for a little while, don't function properly, solving your problem? It's not solving the problem. It's a Band-Aid. And this is why we do what we do. We want to educate you. We want to empower women. We want to tell you that there's another way. Sarah says in the beginning of her podcast, I want you to wake up. We as a society need to wake up and start paying attention to what our bodies are telling us. I didn't do that. I don't have a story of going through infertility, but I do have a story of having a lot of health issues that impacted my kids. And that's why I'm so passionate about spreading this message, because I've seen the impact on prenatal health and ignoring the symptoms and just thinking, whatever, it's normal, can have. And it's not easy once you have kids and they have their own health issues, and you have to go and advocate them with the doctor, and you have to fight with the doctor, and you've got to, it's so much stress.
It is.
It's so worth putting the effort in before. It really, really is. And this is totally off topic, but I wanted to kind of just bring this up because we mentioned epigenetics, and I think it's important for us to kind of define what that means for people who may not know what that is. So essentially what epigenetics is, it's how the environment that you live in impacts your genetics. So just because you have certain genes, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, if your entire family history, you have a whole bunch of Alzheimer's in your family, it doesn't mean that you are doomed to get it. How you live your life and how you surround yourself and your environment will trigger the genes on or off. And that's what epigenetics means. And so there's a lot of research going on in epigenetics now, and we are starting to see that our environment has a big impact on the diseases or the ailments that we have. The environment that our parents had when they conceived us also has an impact. So if they were both super stressful and then they conceived you, and then your mother was super stressed out and eating a lot of bad food, that's going to have an impact on your health now, and then that will have an impact on your children. And this is why it's really important to know this information so that you can make those choices. You can talk with your spouse. I mean, it can't just be you making these changes. It has to be your spouse too, because you know you both are part of making that baby. And I can't tell you how many times we have seen, you know, we work on all the women, the doctors have them go through IVF and they do all the tests, and the men's health aren't as great as they could be. And just by doing that improvement, it increases your chances of success that much more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just kind of to my story on this, my mom was adopted, and she was adopted with her twin brother. And so, and this was very back in the 40s, and her birth mother, you know, didn't tell anyone about this. So a lot of secrecy, and I'm assuming a lot of stress associated with that pregnancy of my mom. And then my mom had me, and my mom had a pretty healthy diet. But then we lived in a heavily treed, essentially as a forest, in a cedar house. And we used to get carpenter ants coming in. So my mom would spray the house on a regular basis with to kill these carpenter ants. So a really high, we used to have to like leave the house for 2 or 3 hours while the guys were spraying in there for these carpenter ants. And my dog ended up dying at 10 of cancer. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, me for years, I think went on for probably 10 years, me inhaling all of these fumes. Did that impact anything to do with my fertility? And also the fact that my dad is a chemist, and he had a chemical company that I worked in, and started cleaning toilets there when I was like 14 in a chemical factory manufacturing dish detergent and laundry detergent. And I worked for him for over 10 years, inhaling, you know, all these chemicals. And I've just put this stuff together put it all together recently, thinking, well, wait a minute, these environmental toxins, did that for me trigger something? I don't know.
Yeah, and you never know. And it's always a hindsight when, you know, you start to learn about listening to your body and you learn about the things that you can do in your lifestyle. You start to think back of all of the things in your childhood going, wait a second. Oh, yeah. You know, I was on antibiotics for acne for 2 years. That probably destroyed my gut.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, I for me, I had tonsillitis constantly, and there is a very high link between kids with tonsillitis and dairy sensitivities.
Yep.
Well, I do have a pretty severe dairy sensitivity. And so it's, you know, again, it's not this fear mongering of like, you have to be perfect, you have to do everything perfectly, but just educating yourself and knowing this information, I think is so, so important. And really look at all of the different aspects in your life to see if you've optimized it the best you can, to see if that has impacted your fertility before just rushing off to IVF. Because if your health isn't what it should have been beforehand, it definitely can impact your kids. And it's so sad when I see that. And it's just not talked about enough.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then the financial strain of an IVF taking 3 cycles at a cost of $60,000, like that is big money. That is a lot of money. And looking at it naturally or taking a functional approach is way, way, way less expensive than that. And then it sets you up for you and your partner and your family and your future children and their future children to look at it from an epigenetics point of view for generations and generations. So it's crucial. So I guess we'll kind of dig into the functional approach and kind of what we start with. So we typically start with looking at diet, and the couples we work with and people that we talk with on a regular basis. That's usually the last place people start when they think of, oh, I've got issues with my menstrual cycle. I've got issues with other health issues. Diet, we don't even think that's part of it. But functional medicine is the first step. So we look at doing a food sensitivity test, and I'll have Brandy talk about that in a minute. And then we do an elimination diet. So we go through that in episode 25 in a lot more detail. But basically taking out the top allergens, which are dairy, gluten, soy, corn, peanuts, and eggs. You take them out for 10 days. So you can do anything for 10 days. Take them out for 10 days and then systematically reintroduce them to see exactly how food impacts your body. And this part is it's only for 10 days taking it out, and systematically over the course of 30 days, and then you really can see how this food is impacting you, and it's life-changing.
Yeah, and for some people, just that part alone can be the thing that makes the biggest impact. And we've seen that. We have seen that for some people, the food was the biggest impact for them. And there are so many people who are sensitive to so many different things, unfortunately, nowadays that we weren't sensitive to before, just because of the way things are farmed now, the chemicals that are being used on our crops, the amount of packaged foods that our body just genetically or historically was never used to. And so that's why this is a really crucial first step, because the diet has a very big impact on the body. If you are eating something that your body is sensitive to, even though you may not think that you're having symptoms, there could be inflammatory processes going on underneath the surface that you're not aware of, and it could have been going on for years. So, that little postnasal drip that you've always had that, you kind of thought, well, whatever, it's not a big deal, or that a little patch of eczema on your arm, or the brain fog that you're starting to have now every day. Those are all little symptoms that a lot of times are associated with food. And when you take the food out of your diet, so the elimination diet, like Sarah said, 10 days is generally enough to see a difference. You'll start to wake up saying, my head is clear. My skin's starting to clear up. I don't have that postnasal drip. I'm feeling happier. I have more energy. And then you reintroduce one of the foods that you took out and you feel horrible. And a lot of times people will come to us and say, I don't understand why I feel this way, because I didn't feel like that before. And it's because you actually gave your body a chance to reduce inflammation and to allow your immune system to calm down a little bit. And when you bring that back in, it's a huge stressor, and then you really actually feel it. And it's a good wake-up call. And I challenge anybody, whether they're going through infertility or not, try an elimination diet and just see how you feel, because it can have a very, very big impact on your health. And it definitely has a very big impact on fertility and cycles.
Absolutely. And we use functional tests and with our program as well. So so then one of the first ones to look at is the food sensitivity testing. And a lot of times people we work with are doctors, nurses, people in the medical profession that are going through infertility themselves. And they love the testing side of this, because it's test, don't guess. You're not throwing a dart at a dartboard in the dark. It's taking a targeted approach to see exactly what's going on. But then it's the tests are the beginning. You have after that, you need to make those diet and lifestyle changes, which can be simple but not easy, and it takes a little bit of time. So it is to be, although in the very beginning you can start to notice a lot of change early on, which then spurs you on even more. So that's the experience that our couples that we work with have had. So as far as food sensitivity, we go into on, I don't have the exact episode, but I'll link it in the show notes. For food sensitivity testing in a lot of detail, but just briefly, Brandy, what are some food sensitivity tests that we look at?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is no perfect food sensitivity test. And so essentially what a food sensitivity test is, it's looking to see not whether or not you're allergic to something, but whether or not your body is having an immune response. and it's causing some sort of reaction in the body. And a lot of times it's a delayed reaction. And so we use a couple of different ones. We use the LEAP MRT. That one is called the mediator release test. So it looks at things a little bit differently, but it's essentially measuring how your immune system is responding to some of the most common foods. If we work with somebody who's in Canada or overseas, we can't use the MRT because it's a blood draw. So we will use an IgG dry blood spot test. And it's similar in that it's looking for a delayed reaction by your immune system to the foods that are on that test. So again, it's not perfect. It's not going to tell us everything, but it is a good starting point. And for some people, just seeing it on paper is enough for them to say, okay, yeah, this is a problem for me. I definitely need to keep it out. And so in that sense, it's a good tool, but it's a starting point. And there are so many things that you could be sensitive to that might not show up, but you just know, for instance, if I eat tomatoes, I get gas. Well, that might not show up on a food sensitivity test, but if you have made that connection, then you know for you whether or not you're sensitive to it or not on a test or on a piece of paper. Don't eat it because you know it doesn't make you feel well.
Yeah, the next test we do is the Dutch test. And we had Dr. Carrie Jones coming on to talk about the Dutch test. So you can definitely check out her episode about that and the importance. We go into detail about if you have POF or POI or low AMH and why the Dutch test is important. But really, Brandy, can you just give us a quick overview about the Dutch test and why that's important for people as a first step with infertility?
Yeah, so we have you do the Dutch test 5 days after you've ovulated so that we can try to catch the peak of both your estrogen and progesterone to see how well your body is producing both of those hormones. Now, when we do the Dutch test, the nice thing about it is it doesn't just look at just estrogen and progesterone themselves. What it actually does is it breaks it down even further to tell us how is your body breaking down each of those hormones into their individual metabolites, and are they using those hormones well? So the big one is estrogen, and we a lot of times see women will come and they say, well, my doctor said my estrogen is normal, and then we'll do a Dutch test and we'll see their estrogen is actually on the low side, but then the estrogen they are making, sometimes it's not the great estrogen. It's an estrogen that is very potent in that it can cause DNA damage. So that's important to know because if you're making that type of estrogen predominantly, we want to help your body clear that out really well so that you're making the nice protective estrogen that works really well with your body for fertility. So the Dutch test gives us a lot of information. It tells us how you're dealing with stress because it looks at cortisol. It looks at your melatonin, which is associated with sleeping. So it gives us a lot of information, baseline information about how are your hormones doing, how are you handling stress, and how does that correlate with how you're feeling when you came to talk to us.
Yeah, the next one we look at is a stool test. So we look at the GI map that looks at the DNA of your stool. And the majority of people we work with, there is some sort of parasite, worm, fungal infection, bacterial infection. So this is where we really dig into the health of the gut. And again, it seems, well, why would I focus on my gut health if I'm trying to help my hormones? But this is the beginning stages of helping your hormones. So Brandy, can you talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, I love stool testing. It's my favorite. It's my favorite test. But the reason why this is really important is a lot of times we do have some underlying infections going on that we don't know are there, and those are going to have an impact on the health of our gut and our digestion. And so one of the why digestion is important for fertility is because the foods that you're eating, so maybe you made the switch, you're eating really great organic foods, you're eating high quality fats, you're eating grass-fed meats. But if your digestion is not working, you're not absorbing those nutrients. And that is really, really important because you need those nutrients in order to make hormones. You need those nutrients in order to be healthy. So if you have an underlying digestive issue where you've got some leaky gut or you're not digesting fats properly, or there's inflammation in the gut because you have some pathogens or some parasites or bacterial infections, that is a very, very big impact, not only on your fertility, but on your body as a whole. And like Sarah said, almost every couple that have gone through our program and run a stool test, we've found something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to address. I shouldn't say easy. Sometimes it can take time, but it's something that can be addressed, but can have a very big impact on how you feel, and it can have a very big impact on your fertility.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that targeted place to start, because especially, and a lot of people that come to us have gone gluten and dairy free. They have switched to organic. They've looked at their environmental toxins, all these different, made a lot of changes, but things just aren't, it's still not working for them. And so to kind of to add in some of these targeted testing, it just gives us a place to go. And then it's just it's a targeted approach. So as far as how, let's just dig into the gut health a little bit more, and why that's so important.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, the biggest thing is the importance of being able to digest and absorb your nutrients. So, especially for fertility and hormone health, you really need to be able to absorb all of your B vitamins and vitamin D and vitamin C and vitamin E, but also the fats and the cholesterol from the food you're eating. And one of the other tests that we do is we don't do the test, but we review your blood chemistry. And it's not to diagnose or treat anything, but it's to look at it and tell us if it's giving clues. And a lot of times we see clues on your blood chemistry that correlate really well with your stool test, showing us that you potentially have issues digesting certain foods. And it a lot of times will tie back to the Dutch test, which is telling us, your hormones are low, but you're not digesting foods properly. So you're not getting those building blocks that you need to create hormones, or you're not getting the building blocks that you need to repair tissue correctly, or the building blocks that you need to have a balanced mood, because that's something that we commonly see as well. The other issue is that if there are bacterial infections like, let's say, H. pylori or a parasite, that's a stress on the body. And so if your immune system in your body is just focused on handling this big stressor in the gut, fertility is not important. It's more important with having you survive and deal with this big immune stressor than it is for you to produce hormones and procreate. So that's why it's so important to look at the gut. And you may hear different functional medicine doctors use the saying, like, the gut is the center of all health. Look at the gut first and everything else will come into balance. I don't necessarily know if that's true, that everything else will come to a balance, but it's an extremely important part to start with.
And check out the episode where Brandy and I dig into stool testing. That's December 3rd, 2018 episode. And we dig into this, the gut health and stool testing, a lot more detail, because there's a lot more to it. And then sleep. This is something we work with our clients for months. And it's really the cornerstone foundation of healthy, well, being healthy, and also healthy hormones and fertility. Looking at your sleep hygiene. Are you getting to bed before 10:30 p.m.? Are you taking your electronics out of your room? Is the room dark? Are you waking up during the night? Are you having a hard time going to sleep? Like, all of these different clues when we ask about your sleep are huge. And as we go through working with you, then we can help with some of those issues. Anything you wanted to say on sleep, Brandy?
Yeah, so sleep, I think, is really undervalued. And the reason why we focus so much on sleep is because if you are not sleeping, then you're not giving your body the time it needs to rest and repair, which is extremely important. The other important part that happens in sleep is that you produce melatonin. Melatonin is a potent antioxidant, so that's really important. But the other thing that sleep can impact is your mood the next day, your energy levels the next day, but it also has a very big impact on your blood sugar. And so if your blood sugar is being impacted and it's widely going up and down constantly throughout the day, that's a very, very big stress on the body. And as I mentioned with gut health, if you have a lot of stress underneath this, like, going on underneath that you're not aware of, your body is not thinking about procreation, it's thinking about survival. And so really looking into all these potential stressors that you have going on underneath the hood, so to speak, are really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Another one that we don't think that is correlated with our hormones and fertility is our poop, and really why that's so important. And a lot of times we find that people, it's either I think the majority of the things that we find is more of a constipation issue, but also it could be like people think it's normal to have diarrhea every day, or to not go to the bathroom for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, it's a huge one. So, I mean, let's talk about diarrhea first. So, if you have loose stools and diarrhea every day, that can be an indication that you are not absorbing nutrients properly because things are going through your system way too quickly and there's not enough time for that food or the nutrients that you're taking in to go through the system and be absorbed correctly so that your body can use them. That's also an indication that there's something definitely wrong going on because loose stools and diarrhea all the time is a red flag for sure. You definitely want to look and see what else is going on that's causing that. So that's a big issue. And again, that's a symptom that people think is common, but it's not normal. The other side of the spectrum is constipation. So we have a lot of people who come to us and say, yeah, I go to the bathroom, every 2, maybe 3 days. That's not normal either.
Mhm.
Because what's happening is if that's happening, then your stool is basically eliminating toxins from your body. And so if you're not eliminating at least once a day, you're having toxins recirculate through your system. And those toxins are causing inflammation, they're causing stress that could be telling us that your liver is overburdened with toxins. And so it's really, really important that you're eliminating every day. You do not want to be reabsorbing those toxins that you're bringing in. You do not want to be reabsorbing used hormones. That causes a lot of imbalance, especially estrogen. So if you are constipated and you have some estrogen dominant symptoms, that's going to make it worse. And that's going to impact your fertility and could even lower things like progesterone and testosterone. So it's really, really important to, look at your poop. I know it's gross and people don't want to do that, but that is another barometer of how your health is doing.
Another big one we talk about a lot actually is thyroid and the healthier thyroid. We always ask for a full thyroid panel when we do the blood chemistry review, which is really actually a great place to start. And we talked about the importance of a blood chemistry review back on one of the podcasts, so you can check that out as well and in detail after each marker. And as Brandy is saying, it's really more of an educational thing for you to kind of see some, and we say which each marker may mean, and sort of areas for you to dig deeper. But as far as the thyroid, we always ask for the full thyroid panel, including antibodies. So just want to talk about that one a little bit, Brandy.
Yeah, so it is very widely known that thyroid can definitely impact fertility. So women who experience recurrent miscarriages, difficulty getting pregnant, thyroid can definitely be tied to that. And having a healthy thyroid is very, very important for pregnancy. And so a lot of times we see women coming to us where there are some issues going on with the thyroid and they're just getting a TSH done and that's not giving us the whole picture. The TSH may look great and it may look great for years, but the actual thyroid hormones like T4 and T3, those ones are low and it's not being flagged. And when those hormones are low, you may have symptoms of thyroid issues. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have hypothyroidism or anything like that, but the thyroid is another clue that tells us that there's something going on underneath the hood that we need to keep digging deeper on. The liver has an impact on your thyroid. The health of the gut has an impact on your thyroid. Blood sugar balance has an impact on your thyroid. Sleep and stress and diet all have an impact on your thyroid. So this is another really important thing that we look at because sometimes working on all of those things we just talked about and supporting the thyroid are extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm. And the last one we have is stress, and really being able to, especially going through the fertility journey is stressful in itself, and trying to figure out what's going to be right for you, and trying to figure all these different things out with your health. And then potentially if you are navigating the fertility system is stressful. So we look at mindfulness practices, visualization, meditation if you can, if that's just not right for you, even when you're walking, to be mindful and notice that you're actually walking and not really in your head when you're walking, sort of noticing the trees and the grass if it's well, it just snowed again. It's now April the 1st when we're recording this. I'm like, when the grass actually comes. But those stress management tools, things that can help you, are extremely important. We run a mind body fertility program, and people that just do those changes alone get pregnant naturally. So we believe in it all. We believe in looking at diet, looking at your hormones through urine, using the Dutch test, looking at the GI map test for potential parasites or pathogens in your stool, which could be impacting your gut health and your hormones, and then looking at that mindfulness piece and supporting you through all of this to make the changes. And even I just interviewed actually a podcast that just went live on today, April 1st, with Angie Alt, and she's talking about inflammatory bowel disease, and then she used the autoimmune protocol with that. And she has actually a success story where someone had POI or POF, and she implemented the AIP strategy and was able to get pregnant naturally. And it is, and we start off with the elimination diet. Potentially, we may suggest that the AIP as well as we go along. Each person is different, but it's just really being able to know that there's things that can help you before you go to the clinic. And if you have to go there, there's a small percentage of us that need IVF. You have to go there. That's great, but then beforehand, you would have optimized your health and fertility to increase your success of it working.
Yeah, I mean, greatly said. And I think stress is probably one of the hardest things for people to work on. Just because of the society that we live in today. There's so much information. We're go, go, go. We want things done yesterday. And it really is having a big impact. And so we talk a lot about the importance, like you said, of mindfulness, taking a step back, being in community with people, a lot of self-care. Those are really, really important. And like you said, Sarah, looking at all of these different aspects and improving your health, even if you do still go down the road of IVF, these will increase your chances of being healthier, increase your chances of it being more successful. And so it's definitely worth investing the time. And sometimes that time could be 6 months to a year, which might scare off a lot of people, but it's worth it. It's such a worthwhile investment because it's going to impact you not only right now when you're trying to get pregnant, but it will have a positive impact on your body postpartum and beyond.
Yeah, as you say, there's never a negative part of actually looking at your own health and focusing on your health and the health of your partner to then have a healthy pregnancy and then a healthy child. And although we can feel impatient in the grand scheme of things, and I totally get the impatient thing. That's something that is my pattern that I have to work on. That go, wait a minute, I need to take slow steps towards this, and it's not sitting back and on the couch doing nothing, making these functional changes. You are doing seemingly small things which have major impact on your health and fertility. And in the grand scheme of things, 6 months to a year is small in the window of your child's future health, in the window of your future health. I was at a party on the weekend. There must have been 8 women, like 3 of them had breast cancer, and the 2 had all of them had, one had both breasts removed, the other 2 had each had a breast removed. And it was, I don't know, it was just actually like shocking in that such small group of women to know that, cancer and things like this are on the rise, and we're running for the cure, and the cure is already here. We don't need to look outside. And just talking to some of the women about the other health issues they had, I don't know, it's just, there's things we can do differently in functional medicine. Once you go down the rabbit hole of it, it will blow your freaking mind. And that's why I started the podcast, because I'm like, if I know this information, same with Brandy, like we have to share it.
Yeah, and everything that we talk about is not just for fertility. I mean, the same principles are true for anyone, any walk of life, anything that they're going through. It can have an impact on all sorts of ailments. It's not, we're not promising the be all end all and you'll never get any disease or anything like that. I mean, that can happen,
Mhm.
but you are definitely going to improve your quality of life, your health, the quality of life of your children. And then you could be a representative to your family members around you, and maybe they will start making changes for themselves. And that's a positive thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Absolutely. That ripple effect. You start with yourself, and then people around you kind of start asking, "Oh, what are you doing? Oh, wait, okay." And they come along when they're ready, never to preach, but basically, you'll hear this. If you're hearing this information now, you have come to this podcast for a reason. You are ready to make changes. This stuff was not even on my radar, and it comes to us when we're ready to say, wait a minute, I'm ready to look at this thing a little differently. So yeah, definitely you can book on a free call to learn about how we work with couples that are trying to conceive. You can go to Fab Fertile, FabFertile.com, and click on book a free call, and I'll have the link in the show notes as well. And thanks again so much, Brandy, for coming back on the podcast, sharing your words of wisdom. I love talking about this stuff with you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Hey there, Sarah Clark here. So are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, please know that my heart goes out to you. I support couples worldwide who are struggling with infertility to conceive and have healthy babies. Women like Rita, who gave birth to her beautiful daughter after following my fertility coaching system. Or Danielle, who after 2 failed IUIs was able to get pregnant after a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call with me. So here's how you get my help for free. So I offer a free Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call. And on that call, I'll create a plan with you that is going to help you fast track your success. So this call is not for everyone. And I'm really picky about who I get to speak with. And I have a strict but totally reasonable criteria that needs to be met in order for us to move forward. So here's who I can help. So first of all, you need to be able to explore your infertility diagnosis in a new light. So this offers for people who are open-minded, they're coachable, and if you can do that and want to double or triple your chances at the fertility clinic or get pregnant, awesome. So let's get on the phone and chat. Also, you must be an action taker. So someone who's committed to seeing results, you're able to follow directions. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything bizarre. But if you're one of those people who like to consume a ton of information, but don't like to spend time implementing and seeing results, then the call's not really for you. So I only want to spend time with people who are genuinely committed to their own success. So just click on the link in the show notes and apply, or go to Fab Fertile, FabFertile.com, and click on the free consult. So it's a really short application that just tells you about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. So seriously, this is going to be the best time you've ever spent on your fertility. Looking forward to chatting. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you're a U.S. resident, text FERTILE to 345-345. You'll be prompted to enter your email address and you'll receive our fertility yoga download. In this 20-minute intro video, we focus on a calming and peaceful practice to connect back to your heart. These simple fertility yoga poses can help quiet negative thoughts and make you feel more in control. Download it now and get started today. So for U.S. residents, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345-345. For non-U.S. residents, go to www.yogafreebie.com to access your special gift. That's www.yogafreebie.com to access the free fertility yoga download. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman, Medical Director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and Chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. Functional medicine is medicine by cause, not by symptom. Functional medicine practitioners don't in fact treat disease. We treat your body's ecosystem. We get rid of the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, and because your body is an intelligent system, it does the rest. Thanks for listening. Until next time.